Hi, and welcome back to Instavision. I'm Glenn Reynolds. Well, college application season is in full swing now, and we're going to talk again about the higher education bubble. And there's nobody to talk with about the higher education bubble who's better than Richard Vedder. He's a professor at Ohio University, and he's the author of Going Broke by Degree. And he's an expert on the higher education bubble and perhaps what's coming next. Welcome.
Glad to be with you, Glenn.
So we talked a while back here about the growth in student loan debt, the increase in tuitions, and the burdens that was putting on people, especially because it's hard for people graduating college to find decent jobs now. What's going on with that lately?
It's pretty much the same thing the last time we talked. I can't remember how long ago it's been since we've talked, but the amount of student loan debt is greater today than it was when we last talked. Tuition levels are higher today than when we last talked. Universities are behaving like it's same old, same old. We're doing the same old thing. And there hasn't been a dramatic change.
Now, we do see people seem more aware of the risks of borrowing for higher education than I think they were a few years ago. And I especially noticed when you watch some of the sort of popular financial shows like Susie Orman or Dave Ramsey or something. People used to tell you 5 or 10 years ago that student loan debt was so-called good debt, and now they don't say that. Do you think we're starting to see any changing behavior in response to this? It doesn't sound like schools are feeling the pressure a whole lot yet.
No, I don't think the schools are feeling the pressure a whole lot yet, but I detect, and maybe it's wishful thinking on my part, that there is a growing awareness of the problem among the students and their parents. And I'm starting to see more evidence of sensitivity to the price of college, more resistance about borrowing large amounts, etc. So I'm seeing a little bit on the consumer side. I think the producer side is the universities themselves, in other words, are still in a bit of denial on this. But maybe there's a few cracks in the wall on this, but not much at the university level.
Yeah, in my part of the educational world, which is legal education, we're feeling the impact much more directly. I mean, we've had a fairly substantial decline in applications, and students are showing considerably more resistance to higher tuitions. But I don't get the sense that that's filtered down yet at the same rate to undergraduate education. I suspect that it will, but it hasn't. Now, we're starting to talk about a student loan bailout because there are so many student loans that are in default or at least not performing. Do you think that's likely? Is this going to be the next vote-buying scheme from the federal government? Do you think it's likely to happen? And what would the consequences be if it did?
Well, speaking to the second thing first, I've always said the second worst idea ever was a student loan bailout. The worst idea ever was creating federal student loans in the first place. It's a bad idea for a whole variety of reasons. First of all, as economists like to use the term moral hazard a lot. And if the U.S. government were to do a bailout of student loans, in the future, no one in their right mind would pay back any loans because they'll say, oh, we'll just wait a few years and there'll be a bailout. Of course, in addition to that, there's a huge equity issue. What about the 90%, 85, 90% of people who pay their loans back or at least attempt to pay their loans back with some degree of diligence and regularity? And they're going to be mightily unhappy if they learn that the other 15% or so of folks are let off scot-free or given a deal that they weren't able to have. The responsible people are punished. The irresponsible or less responsible people are given a bailout or a deal. Terribly unfair. And then there's all kinds of macroeconomic implications of this. If the federal government borrows $1 trillion or thereabouts, or accepts $1 trillion more in liability, what does this tell lenders to the U.S. government overseas? What does this tell Moody's and Standard & Poor's about the diligence of the federal government in terms of managing its finances? What does that say about our bond ratings, say, down the road a year or two? So this is an absolutely horrible idea. Now, will it happen? Who knows? I would bet against it. Now, the Congress is divided, and there's a lot of bigger issues on the horizon right now with the fiscal cliff. So I would think that perhaps, at least not in the next month or two, are they likely to go do a deal along these lines. But I've worked for Congress. I've had a lot of experience dealing with those guys and gals. So they sometimes surprise. Who knows? But if I were a betting person, I would bet against a full bailout.
Well, I was going to bet against it until you said that it would be a case of punishing the responsible and rewarding the irresponsible. Then I thought, well, that seems to be pretty much the tenor of the time. So now I'm a little worried. If there is some sort of a bailout, should the colleges that got the loan money to begin with be required to bear some of the cost if the loans are forgiven? Should they have to eat some of this?
Amen, 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 which means yes. There ought to be skin in the game for the colleges. Right now, we have a default rate on student loans in excess of 13%. And there's different ways of measuring this, by the way, but I would say a reasonable estimate is we have a double-digit default rate. And some schools routinely lend money to students who they know full well are unlikely to graduate, unlikely to get good jobs, unlikely to pay back their loans, and they get away with it. And they pay there's no consequences for this, no negative consequences. So I think colleges should have skin in the game generally. As a practical matter, though, if you went to the colleges and said, you got to pay 10%, to pick a number, of the student loan forgiveness, of the liabilities we're picking up, you would have a devastating impact financially on colleges and universities, which might be a good idea. But you're talking tens of billions of dollars, which is a lot of money to an institution who spends $400 billion annually in their total expenditures.
What about making it prospective? What about saying in the future we're going to make student loans forgivable in bankruptcy after some sort of a suitable waiting period, like 5 years after graduation or something like that, maybe 10, I don't know. But that when they are discharged, the colleges have to make up 10% or something. Do you think that would be a viable way of doing it? You think that would change their behavior now?
I think that's a more responsible approach to the issue. And I think we could talk about whether we should have loans dischargeable in bankruptcy. I think that's a discussion that's worth having. And I think we could have a transition period to whatever we do. But if we sort of go on record as saying we're going to start forgiving loans, and maybe 5 years, but then we're going to go back to collecting loans, I think it would have a devastating message, and that is you can temper the way you do it and make it work a little bit better. But I think the federal government ought to get out of the loan business. I think the federal government is one reason, a big reason, why tuition costs are rising so much. People are about borrowing money. It's the fuel supply that's fueling the arms race that is permeating higher education. And so I want to get the federal government out of that business completely. So anything that would work to make that happen would be a more positive way of working, I think, going at this, I think, Glenn.
Well, final question. With people right now applying to colleges, trying to figure out where to go and what to do, what's your advice to parents and future students right now? Well,
I think you should think before you act. Too many people have just signed up for very expensive colleges, taking out huge amounts of debt without much forethought. 45% of the kids entering college don't graduate in 6 years, not 4 or 6. And so there's a lot of risk associated with going to college. So I would start looking at lower cost alternatives. For some kids, this may mean going to community colleges first and then transferring to four-year schools. For some kids, it might even mean going to trade schools, career colleges, things like that.
You're right. You can earn a lot of money as a welder, and actually, we've got a family friend who went and got her commercial driver's license, and she's out driving a truck and says she's making more money and saving more money than all of her friends from college, just about. So there are all kinds of ways to make a living.
Yeah, there's 115,000.
Thanks so much for taking the time to join us.
Okay. Yeah, well, I'm glad to be with you, Glenn. Thanks.
Richard Vedder is a professor at Ohio University, and he's the author of Going Broke by Degree. And he's an expert on the higher education bubble, as you've seen. It's great to have him here, and it was great to have you here, too. We'll be back next week. In the meantime, have fun on the internet. Thanks.